Void Miner, Seed of Change, Part 2. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Range. The first ridge broke the world open. From its crest, the valley below looked small and harmless, a patchwork of roofs and river gleam, the forge smoke already fading into the morning haze. Ahead, the Greyspine mountains rose like the spine of some buried god, layer upon layer of stone veined with dim blue light. The peaks caught the sun, but gave none of it back. Ressa spat into the dirt beside her boot. Maker's breath! Never thought I'd see the old roads again. Kaelric glanced at her. You've been this far before? Aye, when I was a lass. My da brought me up here for ore runs afore the war closed the mines. Whole place used to sing with the pick and hammers. She stared at the ridges. Now it's quiet. Too quiet. Stones don't go still like that unless it's waiting. Tovin rested his staff against his shoulders, eyes narrowing as he studied the cliffs. Waiting and remembering. They followed the winding path cut ages ago by dwarven masons, the stones underfoot worn smooth by centuries of use. Every few hundred paces, a marker jutted from the rock, square pillars etched with runes so weathered they were little more than scars. A faint blue sheen ran through each one, alive but tired, like veins under old skin. Kaelric brushed his fingers along a rune. The pulse met his touch, rising faintly. He felt warmth run through his arm, then faded again. Tovin spoke softly. The Arkyn flows still, but without purpose, like a song half forgotten. Ressa grunted. Aye, well, half a song's better than none. Means the old forges ain't dead, just hiding. The air grew colder as they climbed. The wind carried a low hum. Not sound exactly, but vibration. It set Kaelric's teeth on edge. Each breath tasted of iron and rain. Shadows gathered in the folds of the cliff, thick enough to feel. They came upon the remnants of a road junction, the cobble split and overgrown with gray moss. Ressa crouched beside one of the markers, scraping away lichen with her knife. These carvings, she muttered, ain't right. Dwarven make, aye, but mixed with something else. Tovin knelt beside her, fingers tracing the curves. Elven patterning. See how the line bends back in on itself? A harmony of stone and light. This was no simple boundary mark. It was a conduit. Aye, Ressa sniffed. Then what for? Connection, he said. Between craft and spirit. Between those who forged and what they awakened. Ressa sheathed her knife. Sounds like the kind of thing that gets folks killed. Kaelric stepped closer, his shadow falling across the stone. The runes flared once, faint but definite, answering his presence. Tovin looked up sharply. It knows you. Ressa backed away a half step. You mind telling us why? I don't know, he said. He touched the stone again, and this time the pulse spread outward through the ground. A slow ripple they all felt in their feet. The mountain hummed back. They froze, listening. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through the marrow, a distant chorus buried under tons of rock. It rose and fell like breathing, like language. Tovin whispered, The stone speaks. Ressa shook her head. Stones don't talk, elf. It warns. That's a quake coming. Before Kaelric could answer, a crack split the air above them. Pebbles rained down, then boulders. Move! Ressa shoved Kaelric sideways as a slab of granite shattered where he'd been standing. Dust filled the path, choking the air. The ground lurched beneath them. One long heave that threw them to their knees. Kaelric looked up through the haze. Another rock broke free, tumbling straight toward Tovin. He didn't think. He just moved. His body reacted before his mind caught up, faster than any human should. He reached the elf in 2 strides, grabbed his cloak, and pulled him clear as the stone slammed down where Tovin had stood. The shockwave threw both of them backward, dirt and light exploding in their vision. When the noise settled, Kaelric was kneeling on the dust, chest heaving. The hammer at his side glowed through the wrappings, a steady blue heartbeat. Ressa coughed hard, then swore. By the Maker's breath, boy, you near flew. Tovin sat upright, eyes wide. No, not flew. Moved within the Arkyn's pulse. It guided him. Kaelric's hands trembled. I didn't think... It just happened. Ressa wiped grit from her face. Remind me to stand behind you next time. She looked up at the cliffs, now still again. Bloody mountains awake, right enough. Tovin touched the fallen stone reverently. No, it wasn't anger. It was recognition. Kaelric stared at the cliff wall, at the faint vein of light threading through it. The hum had not stopped. It had simply gone deeper, quieter, as though retreating beneath their hearing. He whispered, It knows we're here. The wind returned, colder now, sliding down the gorge like breath from a furnace gone cold. They pressed onward in silence, the dust settling behind them. Dust drifted for a long time after the fall. It clung to the air like breath that wouldn't leave. Ressa was the first to stand. She brushed gravel from her shoulders and eyed the cliff suspiciously, muttering something in Dervak too low for Kaelric to catch. Her braid was streaked gray with stone powder. Her expression was carved from the same stuff. Well, she said finally, I'd call that a fine welcome. The mountain's got a temper. Tovin rose beside her, using his staff for balance. Not temper. Awareness. It moved only enough to test us. Aye, she said. Then it near tested us to death. Kaelric stayed kneeling a moment longer, breathing through the ache in his ribs. The pulse in the ground was slower now, quieter. But he could still feel it, like the afterbeat of a struck drum. When he looked down, the hammer at his side had cooled, its light dimmed to faint threads beneath the cloth. He could still sense its hum in his bones. Ressa bent and picked up a small fragment of stone from the fallen slab. The inside shimmered faintly with blue veins. She whistled low. Arkyn runs through it like blood through a vein. Fresh, too, not dead ore. You don't see that in cold rock. Tovin nodded slowly. The mountain still breathes, and we are walking through its lungs. Cheerful thought, Ressa muttered. Let's find a place to catch your breath before it coughs again. They found a shallow alcove beneath an overhang further up the slope. The ground was level, the wind less sharp. Ressa cleared the space of loose stones while Tovin set a small fire crystals along the wall. The soft blue light flickered across their faces. Kaelric sat apart, watching the glow shift over the rock. The longer he stared, the more he realized the patterns weren't random. The Arkyn veins pulsed in a slow rhythm. 3 beats, 1 pause, same as before. When he matched his breathing to it, the world seemed to steady. Tovin noticed. You feel it still? Kaelric nodded. It's not sound exactly. More like movement in the air. The elf's eyes softened. That is how the Arkyn speaks, not through words or thought, but through resonance. The first forge masters learned to listen with more than ears. Ressa's eyebrows rose. Seed? As in the mad relics that near cracked the stars in half? Your da carried one of those? Kaelric met her gaze. He carried the scars from one. She stared at him a long moment, then gave a slow nod. That explains the way the mountain looks at you. Tovin's head turned slightly. You speak as though the world has eyes. Aye, she said, and I'm thinking we're walking straight into 'em. They ate little, dried fruit and bread, and spoke even less. As the light dimmed, the valley below disappeared into gray. The only glow came from the veins in the snow, pulsing faintly like embers beneath the surface. Kaelric leaned back against the wall. The vibration of the mountain ran through it, faint but constant, not threatening, not comforting, simply present. He closed his eyes. At first there was only silence. Then the rhythm changed. one long tone rising beneath the hum. It wasn't a voice, but it carried meaning all the same. Acknowledgement, recognition, the sense of something vast, aware, turning its attention toward him. He opened his eyes. The fire crystals flickered. Tovin watched him carefully. "What do you hear?" the elf asked. Kaelric swallowed. "Not words, just knowing, like it sees me." Ressa frowned. "I don't like the sound of that." Tovin murmured, "The mountain remembers. The Arkyn inside it was forged to connect, to bend minds to matter. You may be its first echo in centuries." Kaelric looked back toward the dark beyond the alcove. The wind carried a whisper through the stones, faint, layered, almost melodic. It sounded like a chorus too far away to be real. Ressa shifted uneasily. "Tell me that's just the wind." Kaelric shook his head. "No, it's deeper. It's alive." The sound faded, leaving only the slow pulse of the veins. Ressa muttered, Well, I've heard enough singing stones for one night. We'll take watches." "I'll take first," Kaelric said. She nodded, curling her cloak tighter. Tovin sat cross-legged, already half in meditation, his staff across his knees. Kaelric stared out toward the mountain. The Arkyn's faint glow traced the ridges like veins in a sleeping giant. Every so often, the rhythm shifted, echoing through his chest. The hammer hummed once more beneath its wrapping, quiet, responsive, almost content. When the wind passed through the gorge again, it carried a single low note, one he didn't hear so much as feel. He whispered into the dark, "I'm listening." The mountain answered. A pulse, slow and sure, ran through the ground beneath his feet. Not warning this time, but welcome. Chapter 6. The Winding Paths. Morning brought no sun. Only a gray shimmer filtered through the cracks in the stone above, enough to turn the dust to silver haze. The world outside their alcove had changed in the night, the air thicker, the quiet deeper. Ressa stirred first. She pushed herself up, joints popping, and muttered, "Still breathing. Guess the mountains ain't finished testing us yet." Tovin rose without a sound, his movements fluid as always. "The test continues until the forge cools," he said softly. Kaelric rolled his blanket, eyes tracing the faint blue veins that webbed the walls. "Then we keep walking." They broke camp without ceremony. The trail narrowed almost immediately, forcing them to walk single file. Loose gravel crunched under their boots. Now and then, a drop of water fell from the ceiling, the sound startling in its loneliness. The first fork came not 20 paces in, then another, and another. Within half an hour, the straight mountain road had given way to a labyrinth of intersecting tunnels, old mine shafts, collapsed halls, and passages carved by hands long gone. Ressa halted, hands on her hips. "Maker's bones, this ain't right. These cuts, too many turns for proper mining. Dwarves carve clean, not this twisted nonsense." Tovin knelt, running his fingers along the wall. The rock glittered faintly beneath the dust. "This shaping is deliberate, not dwarven. Older. The stone remembers more than your kind's chisel." Ressa grunted. "If you start saying elves dug tunnels, I'll throw you down one." Kaelric smiled faintly, but said nothing. The pulse beneath his boots had changed. Fainter, yet more focused. As if the mountain's heartbeat had moved deeper. Each time they reached a crossroad, he paused, closed his eyes, and listened. "Left," he said at one point. "The air moves there." Ressa eyed him. "Air moves every which way down here, lad. You sure?" He nodded. "It's warmer." She shrugged. "Fine. And if we end up lost, I'll haunt you proper." They turned left. The tunnel sloped downward. Bits of metal jutted from the walls. Hooks, rings, remnants of old scaffolding half melted into the rock. More than once, Ressa stopped to study them, her brow furrowed. "These were forged with heat I can't name," she muttered. "Ain't smelted metal. More like grown." Tovin bent beside her. "Arkyn infused, metal and crystal blended. My people once tried to replicate it and failed. The process required harmony, a song we could no longer hear." Ressa sniffed. "Figures. The elves always making songs out of what should have stayed good iron." Kaelric ran a hand along one of the fused bars. It thrummed faintly under his touch. Alive, almost breathing. The vibration traveled up his arm into his chest, and for an instant the tunnel ahead flickered with faint blue outlines, as though revealing paths beyond sight. He blinked, and they were gone. "You see something?" Ressa asked. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Shapes, like the tunnels are showing themselves." Tovin's voice softened. "The Arkyn reveals to those who listen. The mountain guides its chosen paths." Ressa spat on the floor. "Aye, let's hope it guides us to daylight." After several hours, the narrow passages widened into a long corridor supported by pillars of uncut stone. Their lamps caught the glint of metal veins threading each column. Some bright silver, others deep blue. The air here was warmer, almost humid, smelling faintly of forge smoke that should not have existed. Along the walls stood the remains of forges, bellows rotted, anvils cracked, channels carved for molten flow that had long since cooled to glassy streaks. Ressa stopped dead in her tracks. "By the Maker's Forge!" Her hand brushed the rim of a shattered anvil. "This shape ain't dwarven." Tovin stepped closer, eyes wide. "Nor elven. Look at the etchings." The runes were unlike any Kaelric had seen. Sharp, geometric, yet flowing between each other like linked circuitry. The grooves still glowed faintly with Arkyn residue. He crouched and traced one line. The pulse responded, a low hum that rippled outward through the room. Ressa cursed under her breath. "You'll wake the ghosts, lad. Careful." Tovin's gaze swept the chamber. "There are no ghosts, only echoes." "Echoes can still bite." Kaelric stood, letting his fingers fall away. "This forge, it's not abandoned. It's asleep." They moved deeper. The light grew stronger, fed by unseen sources in the stone. In the center of the hall lay a mound of rubble, half-buried tools and bones. Some small, delicate as an elf's hand, others thick and ridged like dwarf remains. Intermingled among them were fragments of armor none of them recognized. Smooth, curving plates veined with faint light. Ressa's voice came low. "Elves and dwarves both. But what in the stone's name is that?" She lifted a shard the length of her forearm, metallic, light as ash, inscribed with curling symbols that shimmered even in the dimness. Tovin studied it. "Not of any craft I know, and yet it sings. Listen." Kaelric tilted his head. There, a faint tone, just beyond hearing, resonating through the air. When he held his breath, he could feel it instead of hear it. Ressa shivered. "I do not like it. It feels wrong. Like a forge that remembers burning." Tovin set the shard down gently. "Whatever happened here was not war. It was collapse. Harmony undone." Kaelric looked to the bones. "They worked together once." Ressa shook her head. "Not likely." But her voice held less certainty than before. They lingered at the far end of the hall, where the ceiling had cracked open to reveal a shaft leading downward. Warm air drifted up from below, tinged with ozone and faint luminescence. Kaelric leaned close. The hum strengthened. A slow, rhythmic pulse. He felt it through the soles of his boots, through the scars on his palms. Ressa watched him. "You hear it again, don't you?" He nodded. "It's clearer now." "What's it say?" He hesitated. "Not words, just welcome." They camped near the fallen anvil that night, too weary to climb further. Tovin knelt in the center of the room, tracing a circle in the dust. Within it, he placed 3 small stones from the valley. One gray, one green, one blue. Then he bowed his head. Ressa raised an eyebrow. "Praying won't hold the roof up." "Prayer," he said softly, "isn't for the roof. It's for the heart that must stand beneath it." Kaelric watched the faint shimmers rise from the stones. Not flame, not light, but resonance. The tones mingled with the hum of the Arkyn until the whole room seemed to breathe in time. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard something answer. A deep note from the mountain itself, blending with the prayer. Tovin opened his eyes, meeting Kaelric's gaze. "Did you hear?" Kaelric nodded. "Yes." Ressa rubbed her arms. Well, I heard enough. Let's hope it keeps humming and not shouting." The mountain's reply came as a single tremor underfoot, not violent, not warning, just acknowledgement. They woke to the sound of stone breathing. It was subtle, a long, slow expansion and release, like the mountain itself was exhaling through the cracks. The fire crystals had burned to faint embers, but the runes along the forge wall glowed stronger than before, their pulse matching the rhythm of Kaelric's heartbeat. Ressa was already up, tightening the straps of her pack. "Ain't staying another hour in this tomb," she muttered. "Feels like the walls are listening." Tovin's gaze swept the room. "Perhaps they are." "Don't say it like that, elf. Makes me want to swing at the stones just to hear it answer." Kaelric smiled faintly. "Maybe it would." He stood, brushing dust from his coat. The hammer pulsed faintly against his side, its hum blending with the deeper vibration around them. The air was warm again, too warm for the depth they'd reached. Ressa frowned at the shaft leading downward. "You sure about this, lad? That hole don't look inviting." Kaelric nodded. "It's where the hum leads." Tovin's staff tapped against the floor. "Then the path is chosen." Ressa sighed. "Aye, and fools we are for following it." They descended carefully, one at a time. The shaft curved in slow arcs rather than straight lines, a spiral bored by forces neither pick nor chisel could mimic. The walls shimmered faintly, flecks of blue light chasing their movements as they passed. By the time their boots met solid ground again, the air had changed. It carried a faint sweetness, like burnt metal in rain. A low hum filled the space. Not oppressive, but fast, layered, alive. Their lamps revealed a long passage ahead, wider than any before. The walls here bore runes unfamiliar even to Tovin. Fractal designs that shifted subtly when looked at too long, as though moving under the surface. Ressa ran her palm along one. "Feels warm, like skin." Tovin whispered, "The Arkyn lives in those stones still." Kaelric's voice came low. "It's guiding us." Ressa shot him a look. "Aye? And where do you reckon it's guiding us to?" He didn't answer. The hum had grown stronger now, resonating directly through his chest. He could almost make out patterns in it, tones overlapping like voices layered within song. They followed the passage until it widened again into a vast chamber. The floor was uneven, covered in dust and broken metal. Dozens of old forges ringed the edges, their chimneys rising into the dark. Along the far wall, carved reliefs showed shapes. Not dwarves, not elves, but tall, broad beings hammering side by side. Their features were blurred by time, but their tools still gleamed faintly blue. Ressa exhaled slowly. "That ain't right. There's orcish armor in them carvings." Tovin moved closer, his staff casting long shadows. And elven sigils, dwarven forges, all together. Kaelric traced one of the worn figures with his gaze. They built this together. Ressa crossed her arms. Ain't possible. Our folk barely trade iron without arguing, let alone share a forge. Tovin's voice softened. Perhaps before the breaking, before memory divided us. Ressa snorted. Sounds like an elf tale. But she didn't look away from the carvings. They explored the room in silence. Every sound, every scuff of boot or scrape of pack, echoed strangely, as if the air itself delayed and returned it again. The longer they lingered, the more Kaelric's skin prickled. He began to pick out whispers within the hum, not words, patterns, tones, like thought carried through vibration. They rose and fell in waves, too soft to name, too intricate to be random. Tovin caught his expression. You hear it again? Kaelric nodded. It's clearer now, like many voices at once, but all part of the same one. Ressa shook her head. Voices in stone. Next thing you'll tell me is the mountain's got feelings. Kaelric didn't answer. The sound deepened, pulling his focus inward. It wasn't in his ears anymore. It was in his chest, in the rhythm of his blood. He felt it as understanding rather than language. Remember. The meaning hit him like heat against the skin. Not spoken, not imagined, simply known. He staggered, bracing himself against the wall. Ressa caught his arm. Oi, easy now. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, he managed. It spoke. Tovin's eyes widened slightly. And what did it say? Kaelric looked past them, toward the darkness ahead. It said, remember. They made camp again at the chamber center. No one wanted to rest near the carvings. Ressa tended the small fire crystals with deliberate focus, muttering to herself between strikes. Tovin sat cross-legged, whispering prayers to the three faces, his words soft and measured. Kaelric couldn't sit still. The hum in the stone was constant now, a living heartbeat around them. Every so often, faint light rippled along the floor, tracing unseen lines that converged beneath the central forge. He moved toward it. Ressa's voice followed. Careful, lad. Stone's twitching again. He crouched and brushed the dust away from the base. Beneath the grime, he found another carving, a circle enclosing three symbols, a hammer, a flame, and an open eye. The same pattern he'd seen in his dreams. Tovin rose behind him, voice hushed. That mark, it's not of this age. Kaelric felt warmth spread under his palm. It's alive. Ressa exhaled sharply. Everything's bloody alive down here. The circle glowed, faint, then stronger, the light threading outward through the cracks in the floor. The hum swelled until it filled the entire chamber. Tools trembled, dust lifted. Kaelric stood, heart hammering. It's waking up. Tovin's staff flared blue. Step back! But the surge passed as suddenly as it came, the light receding into the stone like breath drawn inward. The silence afterward was total, a stillness so deep it rang in their bones. Ressa broke it first. Make her save us. What did you just touch? Kaelric shook his head slowly. It wasn't me. It was already waiting. They didn't speak again until they were ready to move on. As they packed, Tovin murmured something under his breath. Not quite a prayer, not quite a song. The echoes of his voice intertwined with the Arkyn's faint hum, and for a brief moment the air shimmered with soft blue motes. Kaelric felt them brush against his skin like warm rain. He knew then that the mountain wasn't only watching, it was remembering him, and through him, everything that had come before. Chapter 7. The Sealed Door. They found the door at the end of the mountain's breadth. Hours of winding paths had brought them deeper still, through the collapsed tunnels, hollow bridges of stone, and chambers where their footsteps echoed like distant thunder. The air grew warmer with every descent. The walls lined now with veins of Arkyn thick enough to paint everything in a faint blue haze. It was no longer darkness they walked through, but dim light alive beneath the skin of the world. Ressa slowed first. "Hold up." The passage ended ahead in a sheer wall of black stone, smoother than anything they'd seen before. No cracks, no seams, just a single surface stretching from floor to ceiling, its texture too perfect for natural rock. Kaelric approached, frowning. "It's worked stone." Ressa knelt and ran a hand along the base. "Aye, dwarven by the cut, but maker's bones, this finish. No chisel marks, no weld lines either." She tapped it lightly with the hilt of her knife. The sound came back dull and deep, like striking a bell under water. "That ain't no forge technique, I know." Tovin stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "Look closer. There's the sigils." Across the face of the stone, faint etchings shimmered. Long curves and angular marks interlaced in a web of light too fine to be seen at first glance. When Kaelric drew close, they pulsed faintly in rhythm with his step. Ressa took a slow breath. "That's dwarven script in the core lines. Aye, but it's braided with elven harmonics." Tovin touched the air just above the stone, careful not to make contact. "It is a seal, bound by both craft and song." Kaelric moved closer still. The hum from the mountain was strongest here, so strong he could feel it rising through the soles of his boots. The hammer at his side began to vibrate under the wrappings, faint blue light bleeding through the cloth. Ressa took a step back. "Lad, it's answering ye." He didn't respond. His hand hovered over the stone. The closer it came, the more the runes flared. One by one, waking like eyes opening in the dark. A low tone filled the air, deep and harmonic. Tovin's voice carried above it, measured and calm. "You stand before a threshold of the old world. If you open it, there is no going back." Kaelric swallowed. "Then we go forward." He pressed his palm to the seal. The sound that followed was not thunder. It was resonance. The entire wall shuddered once, then began to glow from within. Light moving through the carvings like fire through veins. Symbols aligned, merged, and folded inward. The surface rippled, turning from stone to liquid sheen. Dust lifted around them in spirals. Ressa covered her face, shouting over the hum. "Kaelric, pull back!" He tried, but the stone held his hand fast. Not by force, but by recognition. The light pulsed once, twice, then split open down the center. A crack appeared, widening soundlessly until a seam of pure blue light ran from floor to ceiling. Warm air poured out, carrying the smell of oil, ash, and something metallic that reminded him of the widow's reactor bay long ago. Ressa lowered her arms slowly. "I'll be damned." The door pulled inward, folding like overlapping petals until a passageway yawned beyond. Broad, descending, lined with pillars etched in the same dual runes. The glow within was soft but steady, breathing with the rhythm of forge's bellows. Tovin bowed his head slightly. "The forge halls of the ancient," he murmured, "lost before the first chronicles." Kaelric stepped through first. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the hum in the air changed. It became deeper, slower, no longer a warning or welcome, but acknowledgement. The light along the walls brightened in answer. The passage opened into a vast hall. Pillars rose like trees, their roots merging into the floor. Between them, channels of liquid Arkyn ran in quiet streams, flowing through the grooves carved into the stone like rivers of molten glass. The heat from them was tangible, but not painful. A living warmth that wrapped around the skin rather than burned it. Ressa's eyes were wide. I don't believe it. These conduits. Still running after God knows how long. Tovin's expression was unreadable awe. Not conduits. Arteries. The mountain's heart feeds them still. Kaelric walked between the streams, the hammer humming stronger with every step. He stopped at one of the pillars and touched its surface. The runes along it flickered, rearranging themselves like living script. He pulled his hand away quickly. They're changing. Responding, Tovin corrected. The old halls recognize what they were forged for. Ressa crossed her arms. Aye? And what's that? Tovin looked at her. Unity. She gave a dry laugh. Unity. Don't keep a roof up. Kaelric barely heard them. His focus was drawn to the far end of the hall, where a massive forge sat silent, larger than any he'd seen, built into the mountain itself. The anvil before it was the size of a wagon. Chains hung from the ceiling, each link etched with glowing runes. Everything about the place felt purposeful, waiting. He whispered, It's not dead. Ressa turned slowly, scanning the hall. Feels like it's breathing. Tovin's gaze lingered on the central forge. Perhaps it dreams. They ventured deeper, past the first hall, into smaller chambers branching from it. Some were workshops, others sleeping quarters. All abandoned, but untouched by decay. Tools hung where they had been left, half-shaped ingots resting in molds. A cup sat on a table, the liquid within long evaporated, but the residue faintly crystalline with Arkyn dust. Ressa paused at a wall of carved names, written in alternating lines of dwarven runes and elven glyphs. She brushed her hand across them gently. You ever think, Elf, maybe we weren't so different once? Tovin smiled faintly. The stone remembers what pride forgets. Kaelric said nothing. The hum surrounded him now, not just through the air, but through every breath, every step. It was as though the mountain's pulse had synchronized with his own. At the far end of the corridor, another door waited, smaller, but bearing the same seal pattern as before. The hammer at his side stirred again, eager. Ressa noticed and groaned. Don't you dare touch that one yet. I need at least one meal before we start opening more holes in the underworld. Kaelric smiled for the first time in hours. We'll rest here first, she grunted. I thought she'd gone mad for a minute there. Tovin set his staff beside the wall and knelt, bowing his head briefly toward the forge. We rest in the house of makers, he murmured. May its memory hold. Kaelric sat against one of the warm pillars, the glow painting soft light across his face. The hammer pulsed faintly beside him, steady, content, as if the mountain's heartbeat and his own had finally found the same rhythm. The light within the old forge never faded. Even when their lamps burned low, the Arkyn veins kept the air alive, shifting between blue and white like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. They ate in silence, bread, dried root, and a swallow of water each. The warmth of the hall was steady enough that their breath no longer fogged the air. Somewhere beneath them, a slow mechanical rhythm ticked, faint, deliberate, as though something deep within the mountain still kept count of passing time. Ressa finished first. She leaned against a pillar and tapped it with the butt of her knife. If I don't know better, I'd say this whole place were still working. Hear that? Kaelric listened. The ticking grew clearer now that she'd mentioned it. A low thrum, click, thrum, echoing through the stone like a heartbeat tied to gears. Tovin nodded. It breathes, it counts, it remembers. This was not a forge built only for steel. Ressa gave him a dry look. Aye, I'm sure the elves will write a song about it. But if the thing starts talking, you can explain it to me when I'm running for daylight. Kaelric smiled faintly. You'd come back, she huffed. Aye, but I'd complain the whole way. When they resumed their exploration, they followed the central hall toward what looked like a series of foundries connected by open channels of glowing ore. The deeper they went, the more the architecture changed. Dwarven precision giving way to a kind of flowing symmetry more akin to elven design. Pillars arched and curved like the ribs of an immense creature. The walls glowed softly from within. Kaelric traced his fingers along one of the conduits. It's not carved, it's grown. Tovin examined a nearby wall, eyes wide. Living stone fused with Arkyn. The forge halls were never built. They were grown from within the mountain's body. Ressa blinked. You mean it birthed its own halls? Stone don't give birth, elf. The Arkyn isn't mere stone, Tovin said. It is the memory of creation, will made solid. These forges may have once shaped it, but over time it shaped them in return. Ressa rubbed her arms. You realize you sound like priests describing a ghost. Kaelric looked ahead into the faint haze beyond their lamps. Maybe it's both. The passage widened suddenly into a cavern so large their light could not find the far walls. The floor descended in terraces, each lined with dormant smelters and channels of hardened glass. Suspended above was a lattice of what looked like iron, though every beam was etched with slow-moving veins of blue fire. The light traced patterns across the ceiling, runes in motion. Ressa stared, her voice barely above a whisper. I've seen the great halls under Kurdovac, but nothing like this. Tovin stood motionless, his staff glowing faintly in response. This is no hall. This is a forge heart. Kaelric frowned. What? In our oldest hymns, the elf said, there are stories of places where all races once came to craft together, where the elements themselves listened to their tools. Those were called forge hearts, but none were ever found until now. Ressa muttered, Well, that explains the smell. Smells like history and bad luck. Kaelric stepped to the edge of the nearest terrace. The heat rose in slow, invisible waves. Beneath the cracked glass surface, Arkyn light pulsed faintly, pushing upward as though trying to reach air. He felt its rhythm merge with his own heartbeats, until he couldn't tell one from the other. A quiet tone, deeper than sound, rolled through the cavern. Tovin's eyes widened. It feels us. Ressa's hand went to her axe. Let it feel someone else. Kaelric crouched and touched the glass. The vibration surged through his arm, blooming into heat that should have burned him, but didn't. For a moment, the world around him blurred. He saw movement, flickers of shape and light, figures hammering at the forges, their blows synchronized with the mountain's pulse. Sparks rose like stars, each one a fragment of song. It lasted only an instant, but when his vision cleared, his hands were shaking. Ressa's voice cut through. You went pale as a ghost. What'd you see? He exhaled slowly. They were here. Dwarves, elves, orcs, working together. Ressa blinked. You're sure? He nodded. Not a story, a memory. Tovin touched the edge of the terrace reverently. The Arkyn stores what it witnesses. You did not see the past. It showed it to you. Ressa grumbled, but her tone had softened. If that's true, then it remembers when we weren't trying to kill each other. Kaelric straightened, looking across the forge. Then maybe it's showing us what we could be again. They moved along the terrace, passing doorways leading into smaller workrooms. Some were collapsed, others glowed faintly within. At one point, Ressa stopped before a large rusted mechanism, half buried in rubble. She wiped dust away, revealing the curved edge of a gear unlike any she'd seen. By the Maker, This thing's massive. Could turn a whole smelter line on its own. But there's no crank, no power draw. Just Arkyn flowing through it. Kaelric crouched beside her. It's still active. The light's moving. Ressa squinted. You're right. It's breathing. The gear shivered once beneath her hand. A slow, deliberate movement, like muscle flexing. She yanked her hand back with a curse. Right? That's enough of that. Tovin's eyes glimmered in the blue light. The mountain remembers its function even without command. Then let's hope it remembers how to stay still, Ressa muttered. At the far end of the cavern stood another set of doors, taller, narrower, their frames lined with channels of dormant crystal. Kaelric stopped before them, feeling the hum surge again. The hammer at his side vibrated hard enough to rattle the buckle of his belt. Ressa saw it and groaned. Don't touch that. He didn't, but the resonance built regardless. The runes along the door flickering to life in response to his nearness. Tovin stepped forward. It senses the seed's resonance. It knows you. Kaelric whispered. It's waiting. For what? Ressa asked. He looked at the faint glow beneath his hand. For us. The vibration subsided quickly as it had come, leaving the air heavy with heat and dust. Ressa rubbed the back of her neck. Well, let it wait. We're stopping here before anything else decides to wake up. Tovin inclined his head. Agreed. The deeper we go, the thinner the line between memory and motion. They made camp at the base of a fallen pillar. The heat from the forge heart kept the air warm. The faint motes of Arkyn light drifted through like slow fireflies. Kaelric couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, shapes moving behind the light, shadows of beings working in perfect rhythm. He didn't know if they were dreams or echoes. When he finally stood and looked toward the door, he thought he saw it pulse once, a faint shimmer of blue along its edge, like the heartbeat of something vast and patient waiting beyond. Chapter 8. Murmurs of the Past. The hum never truly stopped, even in silence, even between heartbeats, it lingered, a faint vibration that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Kaelric felt it through the soles of his boots, through the thin air of the forge halls, through the pulse that had begun to live inside his chest since touching the sealed gate. By morning, none of them spoke much. Words felt unnecessary here, too small for the weight of the world they'd stepped into. The halls stretched onward, branching into corridors lined with half-collapsed arches and walls of smooth, glassy stone. The air shimmered faintly, bending light in slow ripples. The deeper they went, the less the world felt solid. Every step carried the echo of hundreds more, as though others still walked beside them unseen. Ressa was the first to break the quiet. Ain't right, she muttered, kicking a loose fragment of metal aside. Dwarves don't build this way. Too soft, too smooth. Stone ought to have edges. Tovin ran his hand along the wall, the glow of his staff spilling across the symbols half buried beneath layers of dust. Edges cut. This place was meant to flow, to guide, not divide. Flow, Ressa repeated, her tone sharp. Flow and stone. Hells, next you'll be telling me it breathes. It already does, Kaelric said softly. She gave him a look. Don't start with that. I'm still trying to forget the door opened when you touched it. He didn't reply. The light within the walls pulsed once, faint but deliberate, as though acknowledging the truth of his words. They reached the next chamber without realizing it. The tunnel simply widened, the ceiling drawing upward into shadow. Their lamps caught on metal, of the faint shine of work relief covering every inch of the walls. Ressa stopped dead. By the Maker's Forge! The carvings were unlike anything Kaelric had seen. They weren't just images. They were movement caught in stone. Rows of figures bent over forges, some short and broad shoulders, others tall and lean. Hammers swung, sparks rose, molten streams flowed into molds. Above them all, curved lines of script traced the air like captured light. Kaelric stepped closer. The figures weren't just dwarves or elves. They were both. And among them, unmistakable even in stone, stood the shapes of orcs, tusked, powerful, bearing hammers instead of blades. Ressa's voice came low, nearly a whisper. "That's wrong." Tovin turned toward her. "What do you mean?" She jabbed a finger toward the wall. "That! Orcs standing beside kin of mine. Working the same anvil? Ain't possible. Ain't ever been. This is blasphemy. Or worse." Tovin's gaze softened, his tone calm. "Blasphemy or memory?" Ressa glared. "Don't you start twisting words. Dwarves and orcs been spilling each other's blood since the first mountain cracked open." "Perhaps that's what the mountain remembers," Tovin said. "The crack, not the cause." Kaelric barely heard them. His eyes had fixed on a central panel, one depicting a forge unlike any other, a massive heart of light hovering above it, its tendrils running through every tool, every worker. The figures around it glowed faintly in the Arkyn's hue. He felt the hammer at his side hum in answer. The same pulse ran through the wall. When he raised his hand toward it, the carvings brightened, lines of blue fire tracing each figure, lighting the entire relief. Ressa snuggled back. "Kaelric!" But he didn't stop. The hum had deepened into a slow, resonant chord, echoing the tone that had haunted his dreams for months. He pressed his palm flat to the wall. Warmth surged through him, spreading from his fingertips to his chest, to his skull. The world shifted. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then the light within the stone moved, flowing like molten glass, reshaping the carvings. The still figures came alive, hammers swinging in rhythm, sparks drifting upward like embers caught in a wind. He saw faces now, not stone. Dwarves and orcs side by side, their voices carrying in wordless chant that filled the chamber. The rhythm of their blows matched the beat of the mountain's heart. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through him, every strike forging heat behind his ribs. Ressa's shout came from far away. "Kaelric, let go!" He tried, but the Arkyn wasn't holding him. It was listening. The hum around him swelled until it became harmony. In that sound, he felt understanding. The memory of a time when the mountain had been alive with creation, when every strike was a prayer, every tool a voice. Then the vision faded. The carvings returned to stillness, a glow dimming until only faint traces of blue remained. Kaelric stumbled back, breath shallow. His hand left a faint outline of light on the stone. Tovin steadied him. "What did you see?" Kaelric's voice came low. "They weren't enemies, not then." Ressa's brow furrowed. "You're telling me that lot built something together. That's a pretty tale, lad, but stories like that get folk killed." He met her eyes. "I didn't imagine it. The Arkyn showed me." Tovin nodded slowly. "The Arkyn remembers truth, not comfort. You have touched what it still holds." Ressa turned away, muttering, Well, if the stone starts telling you stories, I'll start drinking again." They continued onward, though the air had changed. The further they walked, the stronger the pulse grew. The tunnels themselves seemed to breathe, walls expanding slightly with each low thrum. The path sloped downward again, winding through narrow corridors, where faint patterns of light danced beneath the surface. Kaelric slowed as the hum deepened. The patterns weren't random. They matched the ones from his dreams. curved lines looping around central points, forming circles within circles, a language of energy. He traced one glowing arc with his fingers. The moment he did, the lines reconfigured, spreading outward until the entire corridor lit with new veins of light. Ressa jumped back. "What'd you do now?" "I just touched it." "Stop touching things," she barked. "Every time you do, the mountaineer wakes up." Tovin watched the light spread, his expression one of awe. "No, it's listening. It knows we have returned." Kaelric glanced over his shoulder. "Returned?" "The mountain remembers pattern," the elf said softly. "Perhaps it sees yours in theirs." Kaelric's throat went dry. "Then it knows who we were?" Ressa frowned. "Who we were?" He met her gaze. "Before the wars, before we forgot." They stopped only when the air grew too heavy to breathe. The tunnel opened into a vast downward shaft, a spiral path descending into darkness. Far below, faint light glimmered, slow, rhythmic, alive. Kaelric's heart beat in time with it. Ressa stared down, shaking her head. "That's deep enough to swallow the world." Tovin's tone was hushed. "Perhaps it already has." Kaelric didn't move. He could feel it. The pulse, the warmth, the whisper within the vibration. It wasn't just calling. It was remembering him. The hum deepened as they descended. It was no longer only vibration. It had found rhythm. The sound rolled through the stone in layered tones, a slow, resonant harmony that rose and fell like breathing. Each step they took seemed to answer with a faint note of its own. Tovin went first, lamp held high, his narrow silhouette outlined in blue light. "The Arkyn sings," he whispered, reverent. "I have read of such places in the oldest hymns, but never believed they could exist." Ressa's boots ground against the slope behind him. "Singing songs just echo, elf. Don't you go making it holy." Kaelric followed last, hand on the wall for balance. Beneath his palm, the pulse matched his heartbeat. Slower now, steady, but impossibly deep. He could feel the warmth through the skin, and inside that warmth, faint patterns like breath against glass. The further they went, the clearer the tones became. What had been a hum resolved into layers, low bass that shook the bones, higher threads of shimmered like strings of light. Sometimes it felt like words, though none he knew. He glanced toward Tovin. "You hear them?" The elf nodded once. "Not with my ears," Ressa snorted. "Aye, that's comforting. We've gone daft enough. We're hearing songs with our bones." The path turned narrow, forcing them single file through a crevice lined with crystal ribs. Each step released a faint tone, clear as struck glass. Kaelric realized the pitch changed depending on who stepped where. Ressa's tread brought a low clang, Tovin's a soft chord, his own a bright middle note that seemed to thread the two together. Tovin paused and pressed a hand to the wall. "The mountain is tuning us." "Do not like the sound of that," Ressa muttered. "Feels like we're being weighed before the trial." Kaelric said quietly, "Maybe it's listening." Ressa shot him a look. "If it starts talking, lad, you're doing the explaining." They emerged into a chamber shaped like a bell, narrow at top, wide at the floor. The walls curved in flowing ridges, each vein of Arkyn light pulsing to the rhythm of the unseen heart below. The air tasted metallic and sweet, like iron in rain after lightning. Tovin knelt, placing his staff on the floor. The glow spread outward, forming concentric circles that merged with natural light of the chamber. "These patterns," he murmured. "They repeat the language carved above, but in sound rather than form." Kaelric crouched beside him. "You mean the Arkyn speaking?" "In its way," Tovin said. "Stone cannot shape breath, but it can remember vibration. What we hear may be the memory of 1,000 hammers striking in time. Ressa leaned against a pillar uneasy. 1,000 ghosts singing about work? Marvelous. Kaelric ignored her tone. The melody had shifted again, softer, almost mournful. It curled through the chamber in waves, rising from the floor and traveling up the walls before vanishing into the ceiling's darkness. Something in that sound drew at him. He closed his eyes, the rhythm aligned with his pulse, the higher tones brushing against the edge of thought, not words, not pictures. Intent. A plea carried in vibration. He saw fragments behind his eyelids, fire reflected in eyes not human, the ring of forges, a mountain bleeding light. The phrase formed unbidden in his mind. We forged once together. His eyes opened. The hum answered him, louder, like a heartbeat echoing affirmation. Ressa swore softly. What'd you do? I think it heard me. The chamber brightened. Light burst along the seams of the floor, traveling outward until the whole room glowed with liquid blue. Dust rose in spirals, caught in invisible wind. The melody shifted upward, notes weaving together until the air itself vibrated in harmony. Tovin's voice trembled between awe and fear. It recognizes you. Kaelric stepped back. Why? Because you carry its echo, the elf said. The seed within you. It was born of the same fire. Ressa gripped her axe tighter. Well, tell the mountain we're just passing through afore it decides to test that. No one moved. Light condensed near the far wall, outlining an arched passage half buried in debris. The stones around it glowed faintly as though beckoning. Kaelric's hammer vibrated against his belt, the same rhythm pulsing through the floor. He knew before he spoke that the passage led deeper, toward the source of the song. He turned to the others. It wants us to follow, Ressa groaned. Of course it does. Next it'll be asking for dinner. Tovin lifted his staff. If the Arkyn wishes to show us its heart, we should listen. Aye, Ressa muttered. And if it eats us, ye can apologize to me ghost. The new corridor slanted steeply downward, the hum growing more distinct with every step. The notes now formed something almost melodic. 4 rising tones, followed by 2 descending, repeating endlessly. The repetition felt alive, intentional, like breathing. Kaelric began to notice a faint shimmer on the walls, not reflected light, but images flickering beneath the surface. Faces, hands, tools moving in rhythm. As they walked, the images turned toward them, not hostile, but watchful. He whispered, They're still here. Tovin's reply came like prayer. Echoes, not spirits, impressions left by harmony. The Arkyn records not just sight or sound, but purpose. Ressa rubbed her temple. Purpose or not, I'll be happier when it stops looking at us. They continued until the tunnel widened again. Ahead, the air shimmered with rising heat. The faint motes of blue drifted like dust in sunlight. The hum had become a chorus now, not loud, but surrounding, as though the whole mountain had turned into a single instrument playing the same note. Kaelric stopped at the threshold. His voice came out hushed. We're close. Ressa peered past him. Close to what? The heart, he said. The heart, he said, or whatever remembers being one. They stepped forward together, crossing into the light. The sound grew deeper, resonating through every stone, every breath, until words no longer felt useful. Kaelric looked once more at the patterns on the wall. The arcs of light now formed clear sigils, the same ones he'd traced in his dreams. When he reached out, the vibration stilled for a single heartbeat, then answered with a new tone, bright and clear, like the strike of a bell at dawn. The sound traveled outward into the dark ahead, and somewhere beyond, the mountain answered with another. Ressa's voice was barely audible. That weren't echo. Tovin's eyes widened. No, That was reply. The corridor ahead lit from within, each rune flaring alive one by one in perfect rhythm. The notes continued, question and answer, call and response, until the air felt thick with sound. Kaelric's chest ached with the resonance, but there was no pain, only recognition. The mountain's voice was not foreign. It was kin. Every pulse carried meaning, every vibration a memory. In its song he heard creation, division, loss, and hope entwined like strands of molten metal. He whispered, barely audible, "You remember." The light at the end of the hall flickered once, then steadied, forming a faint archway descending into shadow. Ressa exhaled. "Aye, and I have a feeling it means to show us." Kaelric took a breath, his voice steady. "Then let's not keep it waiting." Chapter 9. The Chamber of Echoes. The corridor ended in a hollow so vast that even sound hesitated to enter. Their footsteps faded the moment they crossed the threshold. The air itself seemed to listen, dense, heavy, full of something alive, but patient. The walls curved outward into a perfect circle, their surfaces smooth and pale as molten glass cooled to silence. Veins of Arkyn light spiraled from floor to ceiling in looping lines, converging high above into a single point that pulsed like a heartbeat. No forge fires burned here, yet the air shimmered with warmth. Kaelric felt it most strongly in his chest, that same familiar rhythm pressing against his ribs as though it wanted out. Ressa broke the silence first. "Well," she muttered, her voice unnaturally small, "this is cozy. Never thought I'd miss the sound o' hammering, but this quiet's worse." Tovin knelt at the edge of the floor, fingers grazing faint etchings barely visible beneath the dust. "These are not carvings," he murmured. "They're impressions, as though the stone remembered touch." Kaelric crouched beside him. The markings resembled ripples frozen mid-motion, as if vibrations had once carved shape into matter. Each ridge curved around another, forming a pattern both random and deliberate, like sound made solid. He spoke softly. "It's the same pattern from my dreams." Tovin's eyes flickered toward him. "Then this chamber may be their source, a place where memory and sound converge." Ressa frowned, glancing toward the far walls. "Aye, it may be where folks came to listen to nothing, and lost their minds." Tovin smiled faintly. "Even silence has shape, Iron Flask. You only have to hear it." "Bah! You talk like a bell's rung too long in your head." Kaelric barely heard them. The pulse had changed again, slower, deeper, pulling at him like the tide. When he took a step forward, the hum grew clearer, spreading through the soles of his boots and up into his bones. He realized it wasn't one tone, but many, hundreds, overlapping, weaving together into a sound both mournful and alive. He froze. The tones carried words, not in common, not in Ilarian, or Dervak, or any tongue he'd ever learned. But meaning still reached him, slipping past thought and language like water through cloth. "We remember." He swallowed. The sound wasn't coming from one direction, but from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, even the air vibrating with faint harmonics. The voices were ancient, layered, each distinct, and yet part of the same chord. "Do you hear them?" he whispered. Tovin looked up sharply. "Hear who?" "The voices." The elf listened for a long moment, eyes half closed. Then he exhaled slowly. "I hear vibration, nothing more." Ressa shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I don't hear anything, but you whispering to ghosts. Let's not stay to see if they whisper back." Kaelric ignored her. He stepped toward the center of the chamber, following the sound. The light underfoot brightened with each step until the whole floor glowed faintly. The hum became clearer now, the words resonating inside his skull. Not speech, but the memory of it. Forged as one, broken apart, forgotten. He stopped breathing. They weren't haunting him. They were remembering themselves through him. He closed his eyes. The sound wrapped around him like heat. Flashes came. Dwarves and elves standing shoulder to shoulder. Orcs swinging hammers beside them. The glow of molten Arkyn casting no shadows. Then the song fractured into static. Shouting. War. Fire. The vision tore itself apart as quickly as it formed. He gasped and staggered back. Ressa caught him by the shoulders. "You all right, lad?" He nodded weakly. "They're not ghosts. They're echoes." Ressa frowned. "Echoes of what?" "When we were whole." Tovin's gaze deepened. "Harmonic imprints," he whispered. "Vibrations of lives once lived, preserved in the Arkyn's lattice. The mountain has become a memory chamber." Ressa shook her head. "So what? It's recording us too?" "Perhaps," Tovin said softly. "Every sound leaves its shadow." The thought chilled even Kaelric. He glanced around, half expecting to see their movements etched into the walls already. The idea that every breath, every word could be carved into eternity by the Arkyn made his pulse quicken. And the hum answered, rising in pitch, as if aware of his fear. He steadied himself and, without thinking, began to hum back. It started low, a single note shaped more by instinct than choice. The tone rolled out into the air, pure and steady. It struck the walls like a ripple on water. The Arkyn veins flared in response, threads of light running outward in circular patterns. The chamber brightened, then settled into a rhythm that matched his hum exactly. Ressa's jaw dropped. "By the Forge Father's beard!" Tovin stared, awe plain in his voice. "He's attuning with it." Kaelric kept humming, adjusting the pitch by feel. The chamber answered, adding harmony. Low tones beneath, higher ones above, until the whole space sang with him. The vibrations traveled through his body like breath turned to sound. For a moment, he wasn't singing to the mountain. He was singing as part of it. The light surged, flooding the walls. The spiral veins of Arkyn ignited from floor to ceiling, forming lines that converged into a single passage at the far side of the chamber. When the last tone faded, the new path stood open, illuminated, waiting. Kaelric exhaled. "It wanted to be heard," Ressa muttered. Well, next time, maybe just knock." Tovin's eyes were still on the glowing path. "Did you see what it's doing? The harmonics reveal its direction. It's mapping us through resonance." Kaelric nodded slowly. "Then that's where it wants us to go." Ressa folded her arms. "Aye, and what happens when it decides it don't want us to be there no more?" Kaelric met her gaze, calm but firm. "Then we listen harder." They packed quickly. The walls continued to hum, softer now, almost content, as they made for the new corridor. Each step across the illuminated floor sent ripples of blue light outward like water distributed by their passing. At the threshold, Kaelric glanced back once. The chamber had changed. The patterns along the walls no longer looked random. They had arranged themselves into rings that resembled sound waves captured mid-vibration. For an instant, he thought he saw faces within the light. Dwarves, elves, orcs. Their expressions calm, their forms dissolving into brightness. He whispered, "Thank you." A single note answered, clear, delicate, vanishing almost before he heard it. The end of Part 2 of Void Miner, Seed of Change.